You're muted, Susan? Still muted. Okay.
Hey, Roy.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Roy, it's 4 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and call us to order. This is the Executive Committee of the Salinas Valley Recycles. I'm gonna go ahead and ask for a roll call.
Past President Robert Poland is absent. We have alternate Vice President Tipton,
Present.
Vice President Cummings. Here. And President Lopez.
Here. With that, we'll jump into our general manager and department manager comments. I'm going straight across to Patrick first.
I have one just real quick update. So things are moving forward with the purchase of the building. We're scheduled to close escrow and be owners on June 29th. Potentially sooner, but we're going through a lot of the due diligence, which is a massive amount of material, and as well as bringing in a couple of specialty inspectors to do some final building inspections for us on our end. So, but the owners have done a great job of sort of preempting all the due diligence needs and taking care of a lot of work on the fire alarm system, the burglar alarm system. So they're doing that now. I think if you parked in the front, you probably all saw the gate out there. That's never been there before. That was part of the part of the arrangement on the property sales agreement for them to complete that security gate. That'll be a timed gate that'll basically open at 6 or 7 in the morning and close at 8 o'clock. And then after dark hours, because we've had a lot of issues out here with this parking lot, that gate will only be accessible if you have a security clicker. So outside of that, things are moving forward with that. And we haven't seen anything yet that raised any concerns for us. So we're going to continue with that. Hopefully have a report back to the EC before we move into the final escrow next month. That's all I have.
All right, department managers.
Mandy's not here, so real quick, give you an update, Mandy is here. Transition with Atlas Organics has already started, so we're meeting with the current vendor next week on site to start transitioning from one area to another, and then free up the other area for Atlas Organics. And then also just a heads up, the board did approve additional funds last month for fuel. That's going to be an ongoing issue from the looks of it. Our fuel energy costs at the landfills are through the roof with the PG&E and fuel. So we'll monitor that. But right now, fuel's about almost 100% increase from what it was a year ago. Yeah, we're paying $6 or so a gallon for diesel compared to $3 last year. So, and then PG&E is also trending very high. So just a heads up for the board. We'll monitor that into the next fiscal year and see how that's going. But just looks like it's going to ease up at all. So heads up.
Thank you, Caesar. Department managers. All right, hearing nobody rushing for the unmute button, we're going to go ahead and continue at this point. Any committee member comments? None. We'll continue to roll. We're in public comments now. That's an opportunity for the public to share comments regarding items not on today's agenda, but within the purview of this committee. We invite folks to use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 via landline or cell phone in order to be recognized.
We don't have any public.
Makes it easy.
See no hands going up is the way we'll phrase that one. We'll continue to move forward, closing public comment into our consideration items, which begin with item 1, the minutes of our April 7th, 2022 meeting. Any discussion from committee members?
Nope.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We'll open up for public comment,
Still no public.
interest in this item. So we will continue forward, closing public comment, asking for a roll call vote.
Alternate Vice President Tipton.
Aye.
Vice President Cummings.
Yes.
And President Lopez.
Yes, thank you. The item carries. We're on March 2022 claims and financial reports. Report from Ray Hendricks.
At the end of March, we are about $1 million ahead of in revenues of where we were this time last year, which works out because our budget is $1 million more than it was last year. So this is right on track, revenue wise. Expenditure wise, as Cesar mentioned, we did do an adjustment this past month. He's also been running shorthanded in payroll, so I went in and kind of rebalanced some of that to release some funds to ensure that we're good for fuel and other items. So at this point, and that happened in April. So when we present April, it'll be a little more rebalanced. But at this point, it looks like everything's on track, and we're in good shape to meet the expenditure budget as was approved last month. The staff report did not include the transfer to the CIP for the purchase of for the organic pack, the $3 million that we transferred, that was done in this past month. So when we report on April, you'll see that along with the building, which is going to pay out of the expansion fund directly. So, and that's any specific questions.
Questions from committee? Seeing none, we'll go to the public, see if there's any questions from the public. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Take a motion on my left, second on my right, and with that, go to a roll call vote, please.
Motion Vice President Tipton.
Yes.
Vice President Cummings.
Yes.
And President Lopez.
Yes, motion carries. We're in item 3, a resolution establishing the investment policy. Back to Ray.
Right, this is a recurring item. We bring it back every year. I do compare it to the California Public Funds Investment Primer, which is the consolidation of all the rules that we have to follow for investing funds. There is literally not a single change in the policy from last year. I didn't even add a space or a period or anything. By practice, we do keep our investments in LAIF, which was yielding a very nominal 0.36%. With interest rates coming up, with some should start to returns in a few months. But that's it.
So your job's too easy because you're just hitting copy and paste, is right?
For this one,
Change the
yeah.
date.
All right, I like that.
I have to change the date.
Questions from members of the committee?
So I actually,
None, none. We'll go to public, see if there's any public input. See no hands going up, we'll bring it back. Final comments, Ray?
I just had to correct myself because I did actually have to change the date at the bottom of the policy.
Minor amendments.
There we
Okay.
go.
That was the change.
So I approve with the change of the date to move forward to the board.
We got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? Roll call vote, please.
Motion Vice President Tipton.
Yes.
Vice President Cummings.
Yes.
And President Lopez.
Yes, motion carries. With that, we're at number 4, a resolution adopting the revised financial policies. We'll go back to Ray.
Once again, we brought it back in November during the bond refinance. And at the time I committed to make it recurring and reviewing it once a year. So I'm just gonna put in the same cycle with the investment policies. It's just easier. We're requesting 2 changes to the policy. One is to kind of put in writing the practice that we've had of using surplus funds to fund any unfunded CalPERS liabilities. We've done that by board act in the last few months. So as of right now, that is still fully funded. So we just wanted in writing that that should be a priority going forward, that we allocate funds to keep that fully funded going forward if something come up. The other change is adjusting our capitalization threshold to $15,000. There were 2 conflicting numbers. One was 25,000, one was 5,000. Accounting best practices is to have the number be no lower than 5,000, which is what people usually use, but it doesn't have to be that low. It just creates a lot of small items in accounting that we have to kind of track throughout the year. So we did kind of touch bases with the auditors to see what they were comfortable with. And we landed at 15,000. I actually wanted it to be 20. So she felt comfortable with 15. So 15 is what we want to change for that capitalization threshold. That. Those are the only 2 changes in the policies. And like I said, we'll bring it back in a year, tweak it over time and see if I could find something that can ensure that everything that has to be in there is in there every year.
Great. Thank you, Ray. We'll go out to the public, see if there's any input on this item. Hearing none, see no hands going up, we'll bring it back to committee. Questions or comments from committee?
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Motion Vice President Tipton.
Yes.
Vice President Cummings.
Yes.
And President Lopez.
Yes, motion carried unanimously. And with that, we will end the Ray Hendrick show and head over to Patrick Matthews.
Well, I can't speak as faster.
There goes my record.
There goes your
I got
speed-
this 5 minutes early.
There goes your speed record. This is not continuing items that we're going to see again and again. So quick, I'll start with a couple of quick updates. So I think I spoke with you, Chris, about this too. So we have at the last meeting had an update from me through Supervisor Phillips' office, who's been trying to spearhead keeping the relocation project on track, or at least keep getting it on a committed schedule. And at that meeting, we reported that he was being told by RMA that it was probably going to be delayed 7 to 8 months. I don't know if, again, I probably need to reach out and talk to Eric directly in terms of what their process may look like, just to make sure we're comfortable that that's the reality. But that is unfortunately the downside. We did have a conversation today, Roy and I, with Republic's legal counsel, Tom Bruin, some of you know, previously the authorities counsel, as well as Kevin, I can't say his last name, DiVincenzo, who I believe is in charge of their infrastructure. And so he's sort of spearheading the work that's going on at the transfer station. Basically, they wanted to brainstorm if there was a way that we could meet their commitments, I think, to the city and the franchise to get relocated under the timeline that's in there. The problem with that is that the underlying issue here is not so much about the improvements for us, which we could work around. If those have to be delayed, we can go in there, and but those improvements are for our recycling and household hazardous waste facility. It makes absolutely no sense from a public perspective for us to open the recycling center there, but not be able to take all the garbage and recycle or pay tonnage that until they have the tonnage limit. So I think after trying to work through some ideas that they had, we all came back to the same premises. That's really the tonnage permit that's the controlling and constraining issue. And that's what they're telling, at least at this point, we've heard 7 to 8 months. So that segues into what we really need to discuss today. As we said at the last meeting, this has a serious budget impact to the authority. As you know, we built our budget based on the assumption that we would be relocating either May 1st or July 1st. It was May 1st and then it got delayed. And now we know it's going to go well past that. And while we think we could have sustained a temporary, an additional temporary delay, now we're looking at a delay that's at least a half a year, and quite honestly could potentially be longer, right? Until they get into that process. Those types of permitting processes, in my experience, can morph into something different. And
Is
so
that coming from the state?
that's coming from the county planning. This is a county planning.
The permit,
Two permits.
tonnage permit. It's just a county permit. It's not a state. What is that?
Yeah, let me explain. There are two permits at play here. One is the solid waste facilities permit that is issued by County Environmental Health Department. They function as an arm of the state, as what we call the local enforcement agency. They issue the operating permits. That permit was issued for a 900 ton per day facility. So right now they have a 500, we have 400. We need 900 to serve the system. And so they got the 900 ton per day permit, and that's issued by environmental health. And then it's reviewed and concurred with at Cal Recycle at the state level. So it's ultimately a state permit, but it's issued by a local arm or designated arm of the state. So that permit was issued. We all thought everything was hunky-dory. Somewhere in the process of Republic applying for building permits to do some of the initial improvements, which were to update the household hazardous building that's going to be our HHW building, which primarily, between all of us here, is primarily just repair work, right? Replacing some asphalt, fixing the building, putting a little awning area in there so that we have a all-weather drive-through area for receiving household hazardous waste.
We're not building a new building. We're just improving the one.
Really just improving the fencing. There's a drainage swale that gets moved a few feet that apparently is an issue, big issue, even though it's just a drainage swale in the asphalt. But nonetheless, all those things collectively raise some issues around the improvements for us in the permit. In addition to that, they have to relocate their scale house so they can accommodate the expected increase in on-site traffic, so it's not backing up into the street. So all in all, they have this permit that application for a permit that requires some changes. And according to planning at this point, all we've heard is that the changes to the HHW building may require some updating of their use permit. So all of you that are familiar with land use permits trump all permits in the world. And if someone's going, you know, if the county is looking at this saying the use permit needs to be modified or updated, that trumps the solid waste facilities permit. Because land use permits are the base core permit, the underlying permit for all other permits. So it is the permit of all permits. So that's where it's at right now. There is likely going to be a delay. It really is centered not so much around the improvements, but really around getting the additional tonnage so that we can shut this down and send all of our customers heading that direction, as well as reopen all of our recycling and household hazards, or 939 program services, because that's really what we're moving over there. But we're also expecting all of our customers who use both of those services, both 939 services as well as disposal services, we're going to want to use the conglomerate of services, because as you know, we used to do these surveys all the time to see what services our residents use, right? And they don't all just come in for disposal. They don't all just come in for recycling. They come in for the suite very often of services. So sort of it has to all happen. So that was the conclusion today. So here's the quandary. We, as part of the commitment and the negotiations with Republic, we sort of did two things. One is we agreed to lower our tipping fee from $68.50 to $64.75 in exchange for them allowing us to continue to provide transportation services at a rate that's slightly higher than their, at least at the time, their current public sector or private sector haulers. And so those two agreements work hand in hand. Come July 1, we have an obligation technically under the agreement to start transportation services. Now, we do that, but it's convoluted because again, we're only hauling garbage that's going to Madison. A lot of garbage is still coming here because Madison, even at 500 tons a day, they can't handle all the franchise garbage. There's an overflow. So that's why the two facilities that work very collaboratively is that we basically service each other. It's just been the priority's been to bring franchise garbage here now and then the overflow to Madison. So under all of these circumstances, we still need a lot of permitted capacity. We need both facilities to stay in play. So we'll start with the base scenario. If we do nothing, we have to lower our tipping fee, but we're going to have increased operational costs because now we're going to transfer over there, but we're still going to have to handle all the tonnage here with the existing fleet that we already have. So it means we're probably going to have to add a couple of trucks and drivers temporarily to operate over that, and that's going to increase our costs. That's the most expensive scenario, is the do nothing scenario. Probably going to cost us about $500,000 over our current budget, which means we either have to dip into reserves. And again, we don't know how long this is going to endure. We just 8 months, someone telling me 8 months today. I hope it would be less, but it could be longer too, because we're talking about a use permit. So, and then having to get another driver and truck in, or at least contract with somebody to come and do it, that's going to add additional costs onto the system. The other underlying issue is that, if you remember, we eliminated 3 positions in this budget. And we did that through attrition by holding some positions open and shuffling people around, and then taking some of the people at Sun Street and allowing them to apply and get those jobs. We need those 3 bodies back, plus a couple more to operate in the interim if we're going to start doing the transportation agreement at full speed July 1st. So that's sort of the worst case scenario, but that's the like do nothing scenario. The one scenario where it makes sense for us is to go back to 68.50, go back to our current tonnage rate. We can still take over that. We can do, we can take over that operation on July 1, stay with the transportation agreement as we planned, bring in some contract drivers to fill the gap temporarily. But going to 68.50 basically brings that money back. In other words, we have the revenue to cover it without having to dip into reserves.
Is Republic okay with that though?
Well, we set the rates, but there's a downside, obviously, because everybody's going through rate setting right now. We're writing letters for the South Valley cities. Salinas is going through it. The county fortunately has a respite because they set the rates in January, but the rest of us all set them on the fiscal year. So that means that either we have to make this decision right away, which is going to be impossible, I think, because we really need to have this discussion with the full board as well. So it means an adjustment to customer rates after the fact or a delay. So that's the downside, but that's the one option that saves us money, allows us to, again, bring back those 3 positions, which we're eventually going to have to let go of. This time they may not be vacant and may require us to hire somebody and then lay them back off in 8 months or a year. And then there's a couple other scenarios which, you know, are sort of draconian, but they're options to consider. One is that we continue to operate Sun Street as it's operated today, just back to complete status quo, the operation we have today. That means 6850. We prioritize all franchise garbage coming here. We get our transportation fee. We basically just delay everything a year. And of course, these are all contingent on Republic and at some level the city agreeing to delay everything for a year, which I know is going to be uncomfortable for people, but that option ends up only really costing us a couple $100,000 in over our current budget, which we think we can really work with on that one. And the final option, and this is the one I hate to bring up, is we work with Republic and we terminate the transportation agreement, get out of the transportation business, operate Sun Street as a self-haul facility only in the interim until we're allowed to move over there. But that puts a bind on Republic. They can obviously go out and get private haulers to replace us, but we have to let people go. And that's going to be the most uncomfortable one. But that one right there is roughly a break-even scenario, meaning that the savings of the reduction in the operations keeps us revenue neutral, basically.
But that also requires the tipping fee to go back up.
Yeah.
So all the
So
scenarios,
all of the scenarios are 6850.
really all of the
Except for the
scenarios
first
we
one.
look at, we have to raise the tipping fee back. to 6850.
And the issue with that, I'm sorry, can I speak? Just jumping right in. So the scenario with that is that all of us are, except for the county, are in the middle of doing our fee increases and getting it approved by our board in time for us. So we'll be an after the fact. Basically, we'll have to go back and then say, oh, by the way, we're increasing your rates by this much.
Yeah, we've given people heads up about it, but until we've had the full board discussion on the options.
So just giving my opinion, one, I think that that's what reserves are there for. So dipping into them doesn't make me necessarily uncomfortable, simply because this is a very unique situation that we should never have to repeat again in our lives. So,
Yes.
right? You know, the 500,000 versus 200,000, I'm really more comfortable with 200,000 than $500,000. But I'm not necessarily against dipping into our reserves.
Agreed, because that's what they're there for.
That's what they're there for.
They're there for contingencies, just like this.
I think we immediately need to sit down with, was there a contingency in it seems like we should have thought about this and put some sort of contingency in the agreement for it extending, simply because I don't feel that this is Republic's fault. But it's their issue. It is not our issue. It's not a city issue. It's
So
not.
maybe you guys can talk them into paying us to have covering the dip in the reserves, but no, I understand that. And
So I almost feel like, you know, and I think Jim is thinking about retiring, but I almost feel like,
says that every year.
I know he does.
I'm still there.
Yeah, right?
So
I feel like I need to go immediately to him and say, hey, you need to sit down with Republic and, you know, you need to see what the dealio is here.
There are sort of three competing issues here, and I know within the city's franchise agreement, there's some conditions. This
Right.
has to
I
happen
mean,
by a
this-
date certain.
Right,
The transportation agreement, we basically either start it or we default and walk away from it. And then the lease agreement, basically, if they don't give us the green light to move on by the end of September, we have the option to terminate. It doesn't automatically terminate. So that just means it's in our, things are really bad, we could walk away from it. But at the end of the day, they still have to be willing to.
so it was a July 1 start, Patrick?
The original projected start date was supposed to be May 1, and then we were told beginning of the year that was probably going to be a couple months longer, so it was July 1. Then we built the budget, obviously, on the assumption we would relocate July 1, but also had a contingency if, it got pushed a month or two because permitting can do
Which
that.
is September. I mean, basically, we're looking at, as
Yeah,
an organization, we could do till September.
we could
but
take
we
over the
can't.
transportation operations, backfill with contractors. My only concern here is that with this, we have to again bring back 3 positions, or at least maybe we can figure out a way to do less, but the positions we eliminated, plus we were likely, because we don't want to hire a driver and buy a truck for
Right,
someone that's going to work for us for 8 months. So we're going to have to work with the union and others to figure out,
how to get a truck.
get a temporary truck driver in here that can, 2 of them actually, that can meet our demands both here and.
But it's not just a driver, it's a truck too.
Truck that, well, we have extra
Right, I
some
mean,
older
it's-
trucks that we can put into play.
Yeah, I've got a couple of trucks out in surplus, so.
Okay,
we'll
something
get
that
'em.
we could.
There's 2 I got a surplus.
We
no
have,
matter
we
what.
have, we have trailers and the drivers can bring their own trucks, but
Okay,
potentially, right?
Yeah, actually, if we go with the vendor's got trucks and trailers.
so without talking to my powers that be and seeing what their thoughts are on this, my personal opinion would be to go with that option of, of course, I'm city of Salinas, so, I do not want Republic to be left in the lurch because that affects my entire city when they can't get the trash hauled, right? So that's a huge issue for the biggest city in Monterey County.
So can you clarify again, which one were you comfortable with
Where-
without talking to the
I
powers?
think it's 2. Where we continue to, the $200,000.
Which was
option.
delay for a year? Because delay
No.
for a year was about 200,000.
Well, I'm gonna clarify something. All the numbers, and these are just rough estimates, we'll have
Right,
some
right.
formal to present to the board. These are all assuming a whole year. So obviously if it cuts in half, because we don't really want to do rate adjustments mid-year.
Right,
No, definitely not.
Yeah, but
they're all assuming though that we raise our rate back up to 68.
right, raise it up to 68. And we continue to meet our obligation of the transfer agreement, start transferring July 1, and then we backfill the extra 2 trucks and drivers here with contract drivers, which again, I'll be honest, it's going to be a meet confer challenge with the union right now because we're still working on MOUs.
Right.
But that's really the way to get around it, other than, hiring
Well,
drivers and buying new trucks, which we really can't afford to do and shouldn't do. because of being-
I don't think that would be something that anybody on the board would recommend. I mean, that wouldn't be something that anyone would support.
So that'd be scenario 2. Scenario 1 is we leave the rate at 64.75, but that's the $500,000 version.
And that's not my,
It's acceptable, but it's not optimal.
it's right. It wouldn't be my first choice.
So,
But it may be the choice that we end up with simply because, we want to stay in good stewards of all of this moving forward. And as I said, I'm going to go back to, it's not Republic's fault.
It's not, this is really a no fault kind of thing. It just happens. But I agree with you. There should have been a contingency in place in case this did happen.
Yeah.
You can blame the county, we're used to
Can we blame you?
it. Sure, go for
You knew what I was thinking.
Uh-huh. it. Exactly.
Not the entire county. I think that RMA should be able to see the importance of this issue and move this forward more quickly than 7 months. I think that that is a ridiculous amount of time. That in this situation, and everyone knowing that this was happening from all levels, that that this shouldn't have been a surprise for anyone, and it was. Somewhere the ball got dropped, and now the RMA should help us pick up the ball and run with it.
And that was actually going to be my point, is that somewhere along the lines, when we were negotiating all of this, somebody should have gone to RMA and said, hey, this is what we're planning. Are we good to do this?
Well, and I know that John was in contact with them, so, and they were, I mean, they gave permits, so in my mind, and I just know I deal with the RMA quite a bit, so, you know, there's been past leadership that I know I could have went to, and they would have done everything they could to make sure that this moved along very quickly. So that's my concern. Is it just leadership that is not understanding the significance of this, and that it's affecting not only, oh, it's solid waste authority, but the entire county? This affects the entire county and our trash and recycling.
Our resource.
It is a huge resource for the entire county.
Okay, I'd like to just clarify the recommendation because I want to make sure we're using the right one. So there are two that I think we're talking about. The one that's 200, that costs us 200,000. That's to go back to what we're doing today, meaning we prioritize tonnage coming here first.
I understand that you want to, Patrick, I think this needs to go to the whole board.
Oh, it does.
I don't think we can make a
No.
recommendation.
And that was recommended, that was the recommendation that the staff report was informational for us and to send it to the full.
Yeah, we're just looking for a little, we're not asking for your just some general guidance. And then the other one we were talking about is where we continue on with our transportation agreement starting July 1st. That will require we bring in 2 more, obviously, drivers and trucks, and we raise the rate to $68.50. That will not cost the authority money. Our budget will be balanced plus into that scenario, but we would honor the transportation agreement, start date of July 1st. We would prioritize tonnage going to Madison, so they're operating at a full 500 tons. That would reduce the operation here a little bit, maybe 175, 100 tons a day. And so we need less transportation services here, but that scenario actually doesn't.
Makes us neutral.
Yeah, so
So as a
those,
board member here, that would be my option as a board member here.
okay,
But I do think that we need, I'm not against us tapping into reserves, and I think this is definitely something the entire board needs to look at. And it's a huge conversation that needs to be had with Republic and the city of Salinas and the county on, how not how it happened, because I don't even care. I care how we're gonna get past it and how quickly we can do that.
How can we fix this? Yeah, absolutely.
And then just throw more in it, that this just includes the operating adjustments. It doesn't include the issues, the concerns that as a finance and operations manager
Right.
have with increased fuel costs and other items.
And my other issue, just to throw it out there, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, well, we're gonna go to the union, we're gonna blah, blah, blah. And in a normal world, you could hire a temp. There would be people knocking down our door to do that temp job. But there are no employees out there. I mean, right now, on the news a couple nights ago, 2 jobs for every person on unemployment. Excuse me, and there's still people on unemployment. People that are on unemployment don't want to work, and there's more jobs than there are people that are
it is a challenge.
available. So I'm concerned
Especially a
about that,
temporary job.
especially a temporary job.
Yeah, well, I think we have a good relationship because we've used contract haulers in the past and we have someone call. I think we're okay on the trucking side as long as we don't get into too much of a concern over, the employment issue. We have truckers that will do the work, that are doing the work now for other agencies.
And I
my
probably
bigger
don't want to
concern-
bring this up, but I mean, then we're getting into union issues and,
We'll talk about that later.
So I'll just say, there's, in terms of process, I wasn't involved with the county side. John handled that side of the conversation. But in the conversation moving forward, know that I've found a lot of success in requesting that staff consider using outside consultants rather than doing the work in-house. And they're willing to do that when the pressure is applied appropriately, along with the matching dollars, which isn't much more than what it costs to apply to get the permit fee anyway.
Yeah.
We've been doing that specifically in the cannabis world, especially with looming deadlines. And I know that they're focusing a lot of their attention currently on the cannabis piece because at the end of June, essentially all these temporary permits and allowances go away. If you're not fully permitted by the state, you're out. And so there's opportunity in there, but I also know that those consultants are overwhelmed. So as we're saying, there's more than enough work for everybody out
Yeah.
there, but approaching and asking about that route and offering it up front in terms of that a little extra it might cost to do it may move us faster than that 7 to 8 months. So again, I'm not involved in those conversations, but if I need to be or you want me, just reach out. I'm happy to
Anything you can
that.
do to just keep it moving forward. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for us, really, the big issue is just, we need the certainty, like, when is it really gonna happen, right?
Right.
We
and is
can't,
there anything that we can do?
Exactly.
well, I think everybody's doing, I know Jim and Steve at the city have been working in the back to try to continue to push and keep this thing moving forward to get it to resolution. I know John's working very hard on our behalf. And I'm sure RMA is trying to find, the best path forward so this doesn't get bogged down.
And sometimes it's just phone calls to, does the person working on it understand how critical it is?
Sometimes it's not a
Basically.
phone call, showing up in person and impressing upon them how important it is.
That's where you come in, Chris.
Happy to play the role.
So I do have one more quick question is, have we approached Republic about amending the transportation agreement to make it coincide with our move to Madison Lane?
We raised the point today. Roy and I met with their legal counsel and their, I believe is sort of in charge of infrastructure, and had that conversation, said we just need to work on how do we collaboratively do this. But again, the scenarios I think I heard sort of general comfort with would actually involve us going ahead and starting that agreement.
Right, but
July
what I'm
1.
saying is as a possibility is if we could make that coincide, what would that look like from a financial point of view?
Well, the simplest thing would be to remain status quo, take our rate back up to 68.50 and see if they're willing to basically add a year to both the lease and the transportation, the start date add a year, and push those both out. But that's going to involve the city because
Yeah,
those
that's just a
timelines
touchy thing with the city and.
those are tied into the city's franchise agreement too about, meeting these timelines. So that would require, a 3-party discussion around that. So.
Which it seems like it already is a multiple party discussion as
I mean,
well. so.
And it absolutely is the simplest, seems like the simplest thing. It seems like we should have put that in there
Yes,
to begin with.
Yeah, to
Right.
avoid that, the simplest thing is for us to just go ahead with the transportation agreement July 1. And then deal with the rate impact, and the cities are all just gonna have to address that with their haulers. The problem is we can't give the haulers certainty on what that rate's gonna be. We can tell them we think it's gonna be 68.50, it's gonna stay there. And they have time to adjust their packages right now, but
right, and that's what I'm looking at from South County point of view is trying to minimize that impact on the South County cities. Because we don't want to go through and have to adjust rates mid-year if we can help it,
yeah, but
or multiple times.
yeah, I mean, we've given a little heads up, but ultimately we could tell them tomorrow, we think we're going to 60-50, adjust your packages. But there's always a chance that the full board decides, hey, we're gonna stick with the planned rate reduction.
And Steve knows that all of this is going on.
We've mentioned it to him, yeah, but I gotta call Steve directly on it and let him know this is coming.
Right.
But we needed to have this
Please.
we need to have this conversation first to see
Thank you.
Because again, we could dip in reserves and put the rate reduction in place July 1, and then we don't have to do much of anything except we have to pull out $450,000, $500,000 in reserves.
And just be ready for the adjustment next year.
And I'm not sure how the full board would feel about doing that or something that, circumstance that outside our hands. So,
Right, again, that's why we have the reserves, is for stuff that is completely out of our hands that we have to deal with in this month too.
I think it's just a question of whether we want to do what we can to mitigate it down to a couple 100,000 versus 450,000.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing a consensus that yes, minimize the damage to the extent possible, but you're right, this should go to the full board for.
But again, minimize the damage while minimizing the impact of all of constituent agents as well.
we'll have a full detailed presentation for the board on this so that we can, today was sort of,
When I can adjust the scenarios, if we're looking at possibly keeping the rate the same for all of them, and to have a better picture of what those are, because the ones that did come, they all required raising the rates, then that's what got us close.
Okay, so I'm hearing the general direction. Do you need anything else from us? All right, let's quickly take this out to the public. Seeing no hands going up, we'll bring it back. And that item is closed, and we'll move into our future agenda items. View ahead calendar.
well, I already can tell you right up front, this is the item. This is the primary item for discussion. We have to make a decision or get formal direction at this meeting so that we can come back in June with the final budget and the adjusted rates, if that's the direction the board wants us to take. So that'll be the primary. The rest of it are all, contract renewals, raise items, and then of course, MOU negotiations. So relatively light calendar, except for we do need
That
to
is the
deal
only
with this.
discussion item, isn't it?
What's that?
That's all we're talking about.
That is the only discussion.
That's
item, yeah.
gonna be a long discussion.
But we're gonna have, we will probably need a lot of discussion on the MOUs. Yeah, because we're getting down the line on those as well. So
Last next week.
Okay. Any public input on item 6? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Bring it back at this point. We do have a closed session, which we will be going into at this point. We welcome the public to share comments regarding item 7 pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 to provide instruction to General Manager CAO Patrick Matthews, General Counsel Roy Santos, and Labor Counsel Colin Tanner to negotiate salaries and benefits of non-management administration unit operating engineers, local union number 3, LLC unit, and at-will management employees. At this time, public comment is open for these closed session items. We ask folks to use the raise hand function, *9 to be recognized. Seeing no hands going up, we will close public comment, recess to closed session, and just, what do you think, 15 minutes? What's your,
at best,
okay,
yeah.
about 15 minutes.
We will
just-
get Christie out here by 5.
Christie has 15.
Exactly.
Hey, Marcus,
Yes,
did you see the?
yes, LLC, I already marked. Yeah, go to news.
Okay, it's 5:01, so we're gonna go ahead and reconvene and open session. Let the record reflect that Vice President Cromines had to leave in the middle of closed session, but we have Executive Committee Member Tipton and myself here, and at this point, I'm going to turn to council and see if we have anything to report out of closed session.
Nothing to report out at this time, Mr. President.
All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. We will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. And Al's still looking at me.